Good afternoon, everyone. We'll call to order the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals regular meeting for August 22nd, 2018. The first item on our agenda is a consideration of the minutes from our meeting on June 27th, 2018. Those minutes were provided to the board members. Are there any changes necessary to those? Hearing none, those minutes will stand as approved. Our next item is nominations and elections for chair and vice chair. The first is a nomination for chair.
I'd like to make a motion that we have Mr. Young stay as our chair.
Second.
Sure, whether he likes it or not.
Thank you for that. All right. Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none. I guess that stands. Next, we'll move to election of a vice chair.
I make a motion that we keep our same person, Mr. Ken Halliburton.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There are none, so congratulations.
Moving on.
Next, we'll move to new business. The first item is a special use permit request. It's application Z18043 by Bobby Copeland, requesting a special use permit with the City of Murfreesboro Zoning Ordinance Section 2 and Chart 2 to operate a group shelter of 25 beds for men, women, and children. And this is for property zoned heavy industrial located at 1417 Mark Allen Lane. If you'd review that for us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board. The applicant, Mr. Copeland, on behalf of Room at the Inn, is requesting a special use permit to operate a group shelter for 25 beds at 1417 Mark Allen Lane. The property is approximately 1 acre in size, and the building is approximately 3,300 square feet. There is an existing parking area, which the striping has faded, but it could hold up to 18 spaces plus 2 ADA stalls. There's a large grass area located behind the building, and the surrounding land uses are a trucking company, wood mill shop, looks like a cement mixer, and down the road is Department of Motor Vehicles. This is in a heavy industrial area. The applicant states in their letter that the Room in the Inn will provide beds for both men, women, and children. They would be in separate quarters. The men would be separated from the women and children with wall partitions. They would be also installing washer and dryer, constructing a full kitchen, and laying down linoleum on the floor. So there will be some room improvements, interior improvements to the building. They will have 2 to 3 staff members on site at all times, according to their letter. And the applicant had previously operated the Room in the Inn in the City of Murfreesboro at 640 Main Street for approximately 20 years. This facility closed approximately a year ago. Per the zoning ordinance, this is a use that's allowed with approval of a special use permit in the zoning district. The zoning district is HI, which is the heavy industrial. The parking requirements requires 1 space for every 5 beds, plus 1 for each employee. So the minimum parking needed for the proposed use would be 5 stalls. So this facility would have more than sufficient parking on site. Part of the requirements for a special use permit is that there are specific findings and standards that have to be met. If the use is approved, it would need to meet all these particular standards. If it doesn't meet any of the standards or one of the standards even, it's something that would not be able to be supported then. So the standards for use permits are that the use would not have a substantial or undue adverse effect on the adjacent property, the character of the neighborhood, traffic conditions, parking, utilities, so things of that nature, so specific constructed facilities. The second one is that the proposed building or use would be constructed, arranged, or operated in such a manner that would be compatible with the immediate vicinity and not interfere with the development of the adjacent property in accordance with the zoning district, which is heavy industrial. The third one is that the proposed buildings or use will be served adequately by essential public facilities, including roads, streets, parking, drainage, In this particular use, it is an existing building, so it does have these facilities already at the site. The fourth one is that the proposed building or use will not result in the destruction, loss, or damage of any feature determined by the BZA to be significant, including natural, scenic, or historic importance. And then the last one, the fifth one, is that the proposed building or use complies with all additional standards imposed on it by a particular provision of this section. So in this case, the proposed shelter is going into a building that was previously used as a doctor's office. So it was constructed as an office. The use that's proposed is a group shelter, which is overnight accommodations. So it is definitely a change of occupancy from what the building was built for to what is proposed to be the use. Mr. Holtz, our building and codes official, is here to answer any questions about what that change of occupancy would entail. But they would have to upgrade the building in order to accommodate the new change of use if it's approved. The parking lot, as you can see in the next slides, it is in need of striping. There's cracks, so there will be some repairs that will need to have to be incorporated into the parking lot. The adjacent uses are shown in the property, the view looking to the south, as well as the one to the north. Additional standards that are listed in the zoning ordinance, if the use is approved, would need to comply with the conditions of approval in our zoning ordinance, which are listed on the screen. And then staff has also recommended some additional conditions for this particular use. So this would conclude my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions from the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for staff at this point? If not, next we'll move to the applicant, Mr. Copeland, or somebody with whom they'd like to make anything you would like to add to her presentation.
I think she pretty well said everything that's attached to the shelter.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Copeland from
Be glad to answer your
board?
question.
Okay. Any questions at this point? All right. Thank you, sir. At this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone that's present that would like to speak for or against this application, if you'd come forward to the podium there and give us your name and address, and you can provide us with any comments you may have.
Edwin Stroop Sr. I own the property at 1411 Mark Allen Lane adjacent to this. My concern is I have rental tenants in 6 bays. They've already expressed a concern of whether they would be, depending upon the type of people and the type of situations that will arise over there, as to whether they would want to renew their leases or not. It could have an adverse effect on my business as far as the rental goes. Other than that, I have a concern over the liability. With liability, I have an air conditioning business that has a lot of metal. I have a scrap metal dumpster. I've already caught 2 homeless climbing in and out of my scrap metal dumpster, trying to haul stuff off to Clark Iron or one of the other scrap yards to sell for whatever they want to sell it for. I understand the need for it. We've also caught, even at their building, 1417, there's been homeless over there bathing outside in the hydrants. In some cases totally nude. We're just concerned about the type of people that will be over there and how it could affect the other people coming into that area by as far as view and reaction. Liability is the biggest issue right now for me for theft and vandalism. If there is any, our insurance rates are going to escalate, which we're not having hardly any traffic or vandalism problems as such. So my concern are those points.
Thanks, sir.
Mike McHenry with Piedmont Truck Tires. We're at 1430 Mark Allen Lane. We also own the property right next door to us. It's just a field. Our big concern is bringing down the property values. We also run a retail facility out of our truck shop. We work on trucks. Very concerned that a lot of the big diesel trucks are left running. You don't turn them on and off. and somebody could jump in one of these trucks and take off, and it becomes a weapon. Worried about how it's going to make our facility look. We're trying to bring in new retail business. I don't think this is a good fit for the neighborhood.
Hello, my name is Trevor Sledge. I'm with Sledgecraft. I'm at 1133 Samsonite Boulevard. I have an interest on the Samsonite. I also have an interest on the Mark Allen. I oppose the rezoning request as a special use permit. The location they have chosen, I do support the organization and their efforts. My concerns are the safety for the people coming to a heavy industrialized zone with fear of them being hurt. Next to us is a trucking company that has 18-wheelers coming going every day. Myself, our company has 18-wheelers coming going, moving materials. I just completed a 53,000 square foot addition to my building, and during the construction phase, I came upon people sleeping inside my building. In the upper office, we didn't have the doors installed in the building at that point in time, but of course do now. I just got our CFO recently. I'm just concerned for their safety and the safety of my property. I'm in support of the organization, but I'm not in support of the location they've chosen. Thank you.
Jim Roberts Auto Repair, straight across the street. My big concern, we have people drop off vehicles, sometimes locked, sometimes not locked. We have to leave vehicles out, people to pick up. Sometimes they don't have another key, so we're leaving vehicles out, basically unlocked in our lot, after hours and on weekends. I've never had any vandalism or anybody bother anything, but it's going to be out there, and if we get foot traffic, I'm afraid it's going to happen. Thank you.
I'm Roger Patterson, owner of Patco Industrial Supply, 1002 Samsonite Boulevard, right across the road. We're also afraid about vandalism. We got guys that works 24/7, 7 days a week. We're also at our place big supporters of the Child Advocacy Center. You know what that's all about. And then we want to put something like this beside that. I don't think that's a very good idea either. Thank you.
Bruce Kirk, Swanson Developments, 1188 Park Avenue. We own 6 buildings. They're on Esther Lane and Sarah Court. About 236,000 square feet, about 12 tenants. We have concerns. We're opposed to a special use. Thank you.
I'm Jimmy Campbell. I work with Piedmont Truck Tires. I have worked for a previous company that was there, which was American Tire, the Goodyear. I've worked in that building at the end of this cul-de-sac for 11 years. We've had one incident of vandalism that I know of in those 11 years where someone actually broke through the fence and stole stuff out of one of the company trucks. I commend what they're wanting to do. I'm a lifelong member of Murfreesboro, lived here all my life. We all know we've got issues. We need to address those issues. This is a heavy industry place. You've got a concrete company right behind their building, which unfortunately had a gentleman that worked there, killed when they were building that place, and it was in operation. We have dump trucks coming in there all the time, semis. We do a retread plant there. There's manufacturing being done there, as well as here, and Sledgecraft. When that building was a doctor's office, it was a pain clinic. I was working at the end of the road. We had all kinds of people coming in, using our public facilities and leaving soiled clothing and Lord knows what all else there. I'm not saying that the homeless people are going to be the same. I'm just concerned for the safety of the ladies, the men, the employees that work there. We do run a 24-hour service. We have gentlemen that have key codes that come in and out of our locked gates all night. What if someone follows them in, they don't see them, and then they're left on our property? You can't get out unless you climb the fence. Then it becomes a liability. Whose liability? It won't be the city's, it'll be Piedmont Truck Tires, because it's our fence. It's just not a good fit. There's a lot of industry around there, and I agree with everyone that's gotten up. I apologize, sir, but I think there's got to be a better place. We've torn down places in Murfreesboro that could have been used, I think, if we would repurpose buildings instead of tearing them down.
Adam Durham, Durham Realty and Auction, 316 West Lytle Street. I manage about a little over 7,000 square feet of property in this area, and we also have concerns about tenantability and property values for that area. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion.
Mr. Copeland, can you help me understand? Ms. Rush mentioned that an employee and or a volunteer, I'm assuming, would be there 24/7. Can you talk to us a little bit about the monitoring of people coming and going? How will they have access? Is there plans that, with respects to transportation, where they're not outside? Can you help us understand how all that will work?
Well, there's someone, of course, in a supervisory capacity at the shelter at all times, 24 hours a day. And I would remind that the shelter room in is a work-related program. People who stay with us, unless there's some type of disability or something like that, have 4 working days to find a job. And when whenever they're not working or at the shelter, then they stay on our grounds. They don't. They're not going to be mingling around anybody's business. They have no use for anything at a tire shop or anywhere else, for that matter. And we do have a curfew there to be in our place by 9 o'clock at night. And at 10 o'clock, the lights are out, and that's it. There's no other moving or going in and out of doors unless there's some kind of medical emergency or something of that nature until 6 o'clock the next morning or 5 o'clock. Sometimes we have people who go to work early. Of course, you've got to make provisions for that. But our situation is involved in work, and that's what we do, and we do make considerations for people who are trying to get a job and trying to get back on their feet. Now, if you're putting us in the category with people that you see at McDonald's on Broad, that's not what we do, and that's not what you're going to see. Bad things happen to good people sometimes, and people can get without a job and lose lots of people are a paycheck away from being homeless, whether they know it or whether they don't know it. And but that's what we do there. We're not catering to street people and folks that like that at all. We're looking for people who bad things happen to good people, and if they've had something wrong and we can help get it back in force and get them a job and get them back on their feet, that's what we want to do.
How long, if somebody enters your program, how long is the stay with you guys? Is there a limit on that? And if some, how is your approval process of the people you take in? Are you familiar with them and that sort of thing, I guess?
We have a 30-day limit stay. We can extend that to 45 under certain conditions and circumstances. That's part of the city regulations. But normally 30 days is enough. If they get a job, get back on their feet. Of course, there's absolutely no charge to anyone who stays there for anything. It's totally free. There's no charge at all. Never has been, and I hope never will be. I see no need for it. We're totally supplied by donations from churches and that type of thing. So, and individuals. As far as people hanging out, we'll have an area. We'll probably have to put up a fence in the back, but we'll have an area in the back with a smoking area, and where they can sit and talk and what have you until the curfew if they're there at nighttime. But there's no, they're on our property. If they're going to stay with us, they're not going to be in somebody else's business. I can tell you that. And if you want to, you can feel free to check police reports or whatever you want to see. We were at the other place 20-something years, so I don't feel like there's any kind of a problem there with that at all.
If you give us your name, ma'am.
My name is Laura Vaughn. I am Bobby's daughter.
Okay.
We were there for 20 years, and they were talking about, all of the cars and the businesses and stuff like that come down through there, the 18-wheelers and everything. Well, we were right there on Main Street. There was a convenience center that was right there next to us, and the street department was right behind us. We never had one issue with anybody ever getting hurt or anything, because as he says, the people have to be on our property. If they step off our property, they must be either walking down to the DMV or maybe they want to take a walk, but they cannot go on anybody else's property. If we find out that they have, then they're out of the shelter. There are strict rules in place to help protect them from being on somebody else's property and getting charged with criminal trespassing or anything like that. We've never had an issue with that, ever. In the time that I have been there, from the time that we closed our doors a year ago. Not one issue.
If, say,
Like I said before, you can feel free to check police reports, that type of thing, and I encourage you to do so. We don't have much trouble, as you might expect that we do, because most of our folks have worked all day, and when they come in, they're like you or anyone else. They're ready to sit down, watch TV, read the paper, eat supper, and take a shower and go to bed, which is pretty much what they do. But as far as I mentioned a while ago, but as far as some of the street people that you see here in Rushboro, and you do see them, I just left the McDonald's over on Broad, and there was 3 out there. But that's not who we cater to. If they come to us, if they're able, they have to go to work. That's the number one requirement, always has been since day one. Hadn't changed one bit since day one. We used to give them 5 days, and then we changed it, went to 3 back in, 10, 15 years ago when the boom was so prevalent here. But we add 4 days. And if there's some complication, some reason, we're understanding as far as something like that, could happen. But generally, we stick pretty well to the rules. And we don't have that much trouble. You can ask, we were right over there, right next to the city garage there. It was, and like I said, she said right next door to the refuge center. We never had any problem with anybody that I know of. The only problem is that sometimes alcohol is not that much of a problem. It can be, and if we have experience with that, then they automatically leave. They can't stay in our place and drink.
They can't drink and they can't. We will pop them with a drug test, occasionally, and they can't have drugs on the premises at all, or alcohol
Yeah.
at all. They will be kicked out if they do.
And quite frankly, probably something that you wouldn't think about, but we don't have that much trouble with that. I think the people know before they come to us. Of course, all those rules are given to everyone. But before they come to us, I think they realize, what the word is on the street, that Room in the Inn just doesn't tolerate such things, and we don't.
The previous facility on West Main, it had a fence around the entire perimeter, as I recall.
Just the area that had the grass where the children played, that was the only part that was fenced in. The back and the front
Okay.
were fenced in.
That was a playground. There was
It was also the convenience center was fenced.
Okay.
that's
Maybe
the convenience
that's where
center
I-
and
okay.
the fencing that belongs to
And
the
the-
highway department.
And
the
I
records
also,
department over there.
sorry, also recall, this looks like y'all are going to be able to manage it up to 25. The
Well,
other
that's a little
place was a little
optimistic.
smaller than that, wasn't it?
We'll average probably about 15 people. What runs your figures up is if you've got a family that's got
Sure.
4 children, and that's obviously going to run your figures up.
They're in a family room by themselves.
But we'll have family rooms, we'll have a men's dorm, which will handle 6 people, we'll have a women's dorm, which will handle 6, and that's 12, and then we'll have 2 family rooms, and a family could be a man, woman, and 1 child. It could be 4 or 5 children. That's something we don't have any control over, but as far as the rules, I think the people down at the behind us there where we were would tell you that we're a pretty good neighbor.
Well, just capacity at if this proposed place is going to be larger than what you had on West Main, yes or no?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Go ahead.
Would it not be larger than what you've had in the past?
It's going to be a larger facility. The bedrooms are going to be larger, but our numbers are not.
Numbers are not any larger.
Will not take any more than what we used to
No, if you get much over that, then you're into a situation where you're going to have more hired help and that type of thing, which we really can't afford to do. So we limit it to about 20 people. We've had more than that because of the situation with children, but that's about what we run. We'll average about 15, 16 people.
I heard lots of concerns about some liability, vandalism, the safety of your patrons because of being in that area. Seems like there is more, from the description, there's probably a lot more heavy use there, heavy industrial use in that location as opposed to West Main. I can understand where they're coming from. You have stated that you are, overnight, which I think some of these property owners were concerned about what could occur in the dark as far as vandalism, et cetera. But you're saying here that no one's going to be outside that facility after a certain part, and there's always supervision going on. But it appears just from the site plan, there's not a whole lot of containment, to really prevent that. So would it be something that y'all would would consider? I think if it were approved, to have much more of a secure facility, so that for folks that were to go outside the building would be somewhat prevented from going across the street, if you will.
Well, they're not, no one is allowed in the front of the building. That way they can't come and sit in front of the building and smoke or anything like that. There'll be an area in the back that will be designated for that. But it'd be just like it was on West Main. If you drove down West Main, you wouldn't know it was there.
Well, it's not exactly like it is over West Main because there's no fencing.
Yeah, we're gonna have.
Well, you had already mentioned that you were that was a consideration. Would it be inappropriate for us to add that as a condition, an additional condition, if we were to approve this?
That's my thought.
It's actually one of the standards in the zoning ordinance. They are required to have fencing before they can open.
Okay, so that would be one of the, we already have that within our conditions, that it would have to be approved.
Yeah, it was my oversight. I didn't include it in the condition.
Recommendations.
Specifically.
You're correct. The board's correct. It was not in my list of conditions of approval. It was on the screen when I had put up the standards from the zoning ordinance, and I can put those up so everybody can look through those to make sure that everything is addressed if that's the direction you want to go.
You're saying it like a privacy fence, or is it a screening buffer type thing that's in the standards?
It's standard number 3, and it states that screening and or fencing shall be required along the lot lines of the group shelter to block such facility from the view of adjoining property.
Well, I'm not talking about necessarily blocking view. I'm talking more in terms of blocking access.
Mm-hmm.
Screening is not, to my interpretation, is just more for aesthetic purpose, not for security purpose.
If the board wishes to impose a condition of approval on the use, it's up to your discretion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask Mr. Holtz to comment about the fencing, just to make, because there is a requirement that people have egress, so we can't lock them in. So I'd like him, just to make sure that we're clear on that part, that we provide legal access, ingress, and egress for.
Property. This facility will be going through a change of use from business to residential. So there's going to be several new requirements, such as all sleeping rooms have to have operable windows for people to egress out, have to have doors, a sprinkler system. But once they get outside, they have to be able to get to the public right-of-way without going through a locked gate anything like that. So a fence around it would be fine, but the gates could not be locked. It'd have to remain.
But you could have one access point, correct?
You'd have to.
Could not be locked.
Could not be locked.
But it could be supervised, correct?
It could be, supervised.
By camera or whatever.
Yes, but they got to be able to get out on their own free will without having a key, tool, special knowledge is what the code would require.
Any questions? Other question, Mr. Holtz?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I'm curious how people get involved with your facility. Would it be something that they would drive up to, or they would be walking up to, or if you said your doors close at 9 o'clock, so if at 8 o'clock, would I be just showing somebody just wander up and try to get approved and get in with your facility, or is it something that's more controlled, I guess, how you gain access to your services?
Our cutoff is usually around 4 o'clock. The shelter gets pretty busy after about that time, because you've got different churches or groups who bring in the evening meal, and dinner served, and then after that there's showers to be taken and that type of thing. So we generally generally don't take anyone in after 4 o'clock, somewhere in that neighborhood. Usually, I don't know why, but most of them will come for admittance in the early morning. I don't know why that is, but that's generally the way it works.
I guess most of your residents, they have more access to public transportation where you were, or the same access to this location?
They're going to be able to they can get onto Rover. Rover comes down on.
To the highway patrol station.
Right, by the driver's license place, okay.
Yeah. So
They would, if they don't have a car, they'd have to walk to that.
Okay.
But lots of them have automobiles.
Yeah.
I would say a high percentage of them will have an automobile. I'd say at least 65% will have an automobile. So they provide their own transportation. And of course, during the day, when these people are doing their job, you wouldn't notice anything about the shelter because people are at work. It just looks like that building that you saw there. There's nothing much going on there unless there are people bringing donations and that type of thing who are in and out of the shelter. We won't allow them off the property at all. They should stay on our property anytime they're there. They can't walk up to the Goodyear store or whatever. That's not permitted. And we operate that way on West Main, and we'll continue to do that.
Mr. Copeland, I certainly do appreciate what you're doing. I have a heart for homeless people too, especially people that have little kids, and because they've had a rough time and nowhere to stay, they have to stay on the streets. And I really appreciate what you all are doing. And I hope some way and somehow we can work that out. I've known about room in the inn, and I've never known any problems to be there.
We generally don't have any trouble. Like I said, you feel free to check the police reports or anything regarding the shelter. I don't have any problem with you doing that, and I'll encourage you to do so. But we generally don't have very little trouble. Occasionally you're going to have some, that's just obvious, but you know, they have trouble at churches and everywhere else, so we're not immune from having a problem. I'm not trying to say that, but we have very, very few. And they understand that before we take them in. And if they cause any kind of a problem at all, then they're not there anymore. And there'd be absolutely no one wandering around anywhere off of our property. That's not permissible as far as operating any of the other businesses or anything like that. That's not going to happen.
As far as accidental incidents, not necessarily vandalism, but any accidents that could occur, and to remedy any concerns in that part, I recognize on West Main you were not only near the garbage facilities, but D&D Oil wouldn't have been very far from there. How many trucks, did you see a lot of trucks go by that area? And a lot of, like, as far as garbage trucks and service vehicles for the city and oil trucks for D&D, were those frequent?
Well, we're accustomed to a high volume of traffic, being where we were, of course, and with the bridge being torn down like it was, and that was the detour which had increased traffic flow
through that area.
Of course, you've got the city trucks who are in and out over there all the time. So that's never been an issue, and nobody's ever come to me and said, you know, you're blocking our way or anything like that.
We got people over here on our property now.
Yeah. Any of your patrons get injured or have any incidents from the traffic at that site?
No, absolutely not. Here, there were no incidents at all. There's no incidents for traffic that happened to any of our patrons.
No, we've had no one hit by a car or truck or anything like that. That hasn't happened. No.
And the reason being is we don't allow the patrons to stand out front in the building and just sit out there and talk. They can't do that. They were in the back of the building, and granted, in the back of the building, the city trucking place, or whatever, street people, they could come around there with cars and stuff because their cars were back there. And they weren't fenced in, the people sitting out there, they would just sit on two little benches and they would smoke their cigarettes, and there's a door right there and they come right back inside. Nobody ever went and stepped over there and went to the street department. Nobody did any of that stuff. Now, they did go down the sidewalk and cut up and go into the
Greenway.
And walk it and access it back in behind there. But that's the only thing that they've ever done. But nobody's ever been in an accident as far as because of traffic or cars or trucks or anything.
And as far as I don't know of any instance where anybody has come to anyone in the office at the shelter and said, hey, your guys are hanging out over here and we don't want them hanging out. You know, we'll stop that problem before we start.
And another thing is, you know, when they say they've caught them there sleeping and stuff like that, well, you've caught them there sleeping because the other facilities that are here that do with the homeless, they don't have the turnover rate that we do. They allow them to stay as long as they're paying rent, as long as they are working, they can stay there. And so that does not free up any space for anybody else to get help. We were the ones that did the 20, that got them the help and got them out of there. And people know that if you want help and you want to get back on your feet, Room in the Inn is a place to go. And that is known amongst all homeless people. Since we've been closed for a year, we still had our phones. And I've had to turn away, I don't know how many women and children and families and men over that year, and still are, and still getting phone calls all the time. So it is a need. It is a need for this community. It's a very big need for this community. So we're appealing to you, and we are appealing to the people around that give us a chance. Just give us a chance.
You could ask your people at the city offices down there, which are behind us, and I don't think they would say anything bad about the shelter. We never bothered them, and they never bothered us. You know, just we were there and they were there. Everybody went about his own business.
Familiar with the Journey Home, I guess their location there, just off of Broad Street there, and it seems, and while they certainly provide a great service, another one that's needed, it seems a lot of foot traffic coming and going, and if you're a retail business around there, it could be disruptive. I guess your model is different than that versus, I mean, I know you're staying overnight versus supposed to be working sort of thing. So I guess I'm envisioning the way you're describing it, I wouldn't have that sort of situation during business hours or really any time of.
No, most of our people are gone during the day working. The only people that usually are there is if it's like a family with kids and one parent is working and one parent is staying with little babies and stuff because they can't afford daycare. And then we might have 2 or 3 people, maybe 20 people may come to put donations. Some days we have no people that come. This is something that you can't just say, okay, well we have this much business this day and this much business, and you have that year round, because we don't. But we will not let any of our people stand around and just mill around outside like Journey Home. We're not like that. We've never been like that. We will have people that will come up that don't know that we're like that, and we will tell them where they need to go. If they're not interested in getting a job or cannot work, then they really cannot stay with us. And that's how we've been able to help as many families as we have over the years, is because we keep them right around the door working and getting back on their feet. And that's what we want to do with the people in this community.
And I think as far as the job situation is concerned and the fact that they must go to work, I believe that we had 2 people in the last year we were there that we had to let go because they didn't find a job after their 4-day allotment. One of those, I would have told you, wouldn't make it when we took him in. I knew what was going to happen there. But and one of them was a lady that I was surprised about because she had stayed with us several years before and had gone to work and no problem at all, but she didn't this time. But 2 out of 270 or 80 people is a pretty good record, I think.
Ms. Rush, if we were to approve this special use permit, does it stick with the operator or does it stick with the location? Or can we?
Normally, the special use permit is for the operator. And so if they move to a different location, or if they cease doing their business, their property, then the special use permit would go away. Someone else might come in and apply for another one, but it would not automatically flow to another organization.
And this is just a special use permit to operate the home, not change any zoning or anything like that?
Correct. It does not change zoning.
Heavy industrial like it is currently?
All the zoning remains the same. They would be given the right to operate the shelter with such restrictions as the board would decide to, I guess we got our standard conditions that go as part of the special use permit, and the board does have the ability to put other restrictions that you feel would be appropriate. Restrictions or requirements, some possible fencing or some other requirement that you would feel appropriate to put on the use.
I mean, there's no question there's a need in our community for this shelter. The biggest positive to me with respects to this application is it is a known operator. I would have hesitancy with respects to an individual that we, as a community, wouldn't know that was trying to put or operate a group shelter at this particular location. My comment would be is, most people that are going to live near this facility are going to have some of the same concerns that were brought up today as part of the public hearing. My view is that the need for the shelter for this community is leading me to vote for it, but mainly because it is a known operator, and feel like that they will stick to their word as they have in the past. So I'm going to vote in favor of this special use permit, especially with respects to it would only last with this particular operator.
Are you making a motion?
Well, I can, but I don't want to limit anybody's discussion with respect to this.
If you were making a motion, I'll second it.
Well, before he does that, I mean, I concur with what he's saying, and I also understand all the other comments that were made. But I still think if I would feel more comfortable having a specified containment of some sort that's complies with, the need to have access to be able to exit, in case of emergency or something like that. I think it just wasn't stated, and it wasn't stated in the recommendations. That's why I was adding this as looking at the other standards that we have to consider. I really didn't see where there was anything in those particular standards that this particular request violated. And I think it becomes and we do have such a huge problem with this. It's been a even with this coming back on board, still not enough to satisfy the challenges that we have in this community. But I mean, I would, if you're making that motion, I would want to amend that motion to include a fencing surrounding the perimeter of the facility.
I'm not sure if I agree with you that a fence wouldn't be needed to enclose the entire perimeter of the facility. I think that to limit the ability for volunteers and persons making donations to park without having access easily would hinder traffic. It could cause additional problems. I do think an enclosure around the green space of the
actually,
facility.
that's where I was implying.
Okay. When you said perimeter, I thought you meant parking.
Not the entire perimeter, but I was exactly thinking along the lines that the perimeter from the building around the back.
Surrounding that green
And obviously the larger that area covers, the more ability the kids and the parents are going to be able to get out and
Have
enjoy
safe
it,
play.
and have a place to play. If it gets too tight, if someone just to do it so people can come out and smoke, which I'm not in favor of, but, but to have more green space that's in a secure area, that's where I'm coming from.
Well, then I was just simply asking you for
Yeah.
clarification.
Yep.
I wouldn't want us to unintentionally create a situation where we were having parking difficulties
Absolutely.
or further problems for neighbors because we were enclosing that parking space as well.
Absolutely.
I think Mrs. Rush just read number 3, that they're required to have a fence up on a certain area of it, and it's in the ordinance already.
Right, it was, it did specifically say for screening, but as Board Member Mr. Tips had indicated, he was interested in more than just a visual screening, but something more of a security nature. So,
But it said screening or fencing is what it said.
correct.
You clear on the type of fence you want? And if it's-
Well, I'm just saying,
that could go to staff.
screening does not limit access. Fencing limits access, ingress access. Both ways. I mean, coming or going, having a fence around gives those families more protection.
Yes, does it need to be where they cannot see visually to see the people, or is it like, the chain link fence up there?
I'm not trying to be heavy-handed on that. I'm just saying, I hear what the neighbors are saying, and I think that would hopefully would make them feel better about having it in the neighborhood. And I think anywhere there's this situation with kids, you can't supervise if you don't have some areas to contain adequately, and that's my concern. And so that's why I'm saying I don't think screening is sufficient in this type of situation. And I'm not trying to say you got to have a 7-foot fence or with concertina wire. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying let's have in this that there's an acceptable containment fencing.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the special use permit for this operator, or limited to this operator, including the appropriate fencing around the green space behind the building and beside the building.
And also including the recommended conditions.
Yes, and including the recommended conditions. Thank you.
Second.
All right, have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? There are none. That application has been approved. Thank you all. Next item on our agenda is staff reports and other business.
I do have an announcement to make. We do have a new planning director with the planning department. It is a familiar face, Mr. Donald Anthony, and would like to ask him to come up and just say howdy. And
Where are you from?
We got to break him in way back when.
Good to see everybody. I just wanted to let you know that I think to better serve the community, we're going to start making some structural changes, procedural changes within our department. So over the next few months, you're going to start seeing some new faces. We're going to divide our planet. We're going to have planning areas and divide geographically and assign planners to each area. And so as part of their job, they'll be presenting their own BZA cases to you. Marina is going to work and guide people through that process, and we'll just ask you to be patient with us. She'll continue to be your primary point of contact for the BZA. She'll continue to put the agenda together every month, and she'll continue to be here to help answer any questions, as will David Ives. So anything that I can do for you, feel free to get in contact with me, and I'll try to make regular appearances. We won't make this too rare. Thank you all.
Thank you.
would you like to introduce our new planner that just started this week?
Is he here?
He is.
We do. We have a new planner. This is Austin Cooper. He's from just outside of Philadelphia, and he'll be one of the faces you'll be seeing here in the future, okay?
Welcome, Austin. Look forward to working with you.
For their approval and we hope to be operational probably in about a month and a half. We've got quite a little bit of maneuvering around inside the building and some outside too. But, thank you very much. We appreciate your comment.
And thank you for what you all do.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
We're adjourned.
Nothing for me.
All right. Thank you.